It appears we are now live streaming on YouTube, Jared.
I see that. So we can go ahead?
Yes.
Okay. Going to call to order the North Gateway Redevelopment Advisory Board. Can we do a roll call, please?
Jason Cox, absent. Mike Alley,
Present.
Barb Hickresh,
Here. I'm here. I don't know if my speaker's working.
We hear you, Barb.
Okay.
Darcy, are you still there?
I'm here. I'm trying to get something to work right and it's not working as usual. But Brittany Davidson is absent. Oh, you are here? Okay.
I heard her. I don't see her on the
Brittany's
screen there.
absent. Nate Levine.
Present.
Sorry about that. So Nate, you are here, correct? Pedro? Frank Pack is absent. Mike White,
I'm here.
Mark Adams is absent, and Dania Ballard's absent. So Jared, it's over to you.
Okay, excellent. I guess we'll start with, can I get a motion for the approval of the agenda?
I approve the agenda.
I second. Jared?
Second by Nate.
All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Can I get a motion for the approval of the minutes from the March 5th meeting?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
We have a second.
Mike Alley, second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. Sorry, this has been a little bit difficult, but let's get this going. So we're here to talk about, get a little update on the Zamora site. As you all know, we've been working on acquiring that property for over a year, I think now. And our plan was kind of a food hub system. And so we have a couple updates for everyone. Clint is here to speak with everyone first about where we're at with the DEQ as far as approval. So if you want to go ahead and take that over, Clint, go ahead.
Sure, I can run through it again real quick. So we just yesterday submitted to DEQ the results of the vapor sampling that took place under and adjacent to the building. There were four test holes drilled and samples taken. All the results were well below DEQ's threshold, which is great news. So that has been submitted to DEQ for their approval. Once they approve the results and agree to move forward, we will take it the prospective purchaser agreement, which is the vehicle that protects the agency from future liability, environmental liability from the site, from any future claims. Then it will be turned over to the Department of Justice, who actually opens the prospective purchaser agreement. And that'll take at least 30 days of to be open to the public. And Normally, there's never, in the past ones I've done with the city, have not been any people come forward at that time. So once that's done, then we'll get the consent judgment issued, which will be the end point of the prospective purchaser agreement. And then the city can move forward, or the agency can move forward with acquisition of the property. As I mentioned earlier, we do have Merit is in the building with some subtenants currently. Their lease expires September 15th, so Merit and all the subtenants will be out of the building at that time, which will segue into Kristen's update as to interim future use of the property.
Very good. So Kristen,
Excellent. Thanks, Clint. Hey, Kristen, real quick, let me jump in. Hey, everybody, just if you have any questions, let's wait till Kristen finishes, and then everybody can jump in, and we'll just kind of take turns doing questions. All right, go ahead, Kristen. Thanks.
So I'm Kristen Rutherford. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm the Urban Development Director. So I'm going to go back in time a little bit to last winter and the homeless crisis that the city is experiencing. And during that time period, last January, December, November, we were rapidly looking for locations to do some duration sheltering. And then we entered into the COVID crisis, and some of those concerns for sheltering were addressed by allowing camping in a couple of the parks in the community. That has worked fairly well for social distancing for individuals and for sheltering locations throughout the summer in the good weather. But as we're heading into another winter, and as we start talking about, how are we going to shelter our most medically fragile and individuals that are currently in camps in parks over the summer, but probably not the best place for some individuals during the rainy season. And we've started looking at properties again. Our focus has shifted to looking at the Zamora site on an interim basis. We've talked with DEQ about this because DEQ has restrictions about sheltering people, housing people, developing housing, any of that on property that has been previously contaminated, even if you go through a mitigation process. And they have said that they would approve this only for an 18-month duration. So there would be a defined endpoint where we could no longer use a facility for shelter, or we would be out of compliance with DEQ mandates. So based on that information and conversations with counselors about this winter situation, we've started having conversations with Arches about what that would look like. I think that our focus right now would be likely either on seniors in the community, or maybe family units in the community, or segments of the population where they would be at greater need or more medically fragile, and perhaps less able to go into other kinds of shelters. For example, women's shelters there's not a great deal of capacity for women in the community for sheltering. There are also a huge need for seniors in the community. So as we've started having the conversations with Arches, we're also talking about what those ground rules would be, and having a situation where people couldn't be there 24/7. They could come, they could shelter overnight, and then they would have to go to the day room space at Arches or other locations during the daytime hours, so that it wouldn't be a growing community and have a limited capacity of individuals that would be seeking shelter there. This is where the city has been focusing on, and then we have Arches representative Ashley Hamilton on the call, who can speak to operational issues. And I'll turn it over to Ashley in just a moment, but just a little bit of additional information. We are still working through what all the funding streams would be for operating the shelter. We do have funding that goes to operate warming shelters within the community. That's another reason that we're looking at a duration shelter here is warming shelters are only available on the coldest nights. There's a temperature limit to when those are operational. The need extends beyond those coldest nights. And also, the volunteers at warming shelters have a tendency to be seniors and more medically vulnerable. And this will be our first year trying to operate a warming network during a pandemic like this. So with so much uncertainty, we're looking at other ways to provide additional capacity, because those warming shelters generally operated in churches. And those churches, I'm certainly not the most up to speed on what commitments they're going to be able to make. Ashley can speak to that a bit, but we do have concerns that if we are relying on the church network to provide warming and they have volunteers that become sick, or they end up with a lack of volunteers because of concerns about COVID, that we won't have that warming shelter network anymore. And so we're looking at some backup redundancy in that capacity for the overnight shelter as well. So I will stop there. And Jared, we can take questions now, or if you want, we can turn it over to Ashley and let her speak about operations, and then open it up to questions for all of us.
Okay, yeah, my phone screwed up there, so I missed the end of whatever you were saying. Sorry about that. I think I would like to open up if anybody has some questions. The way I'm going to do this, because I can't really see everybody on my phone, I'm just going to go through the list of who checked in as here, and then if they have any questions, they can unmute and ask their questions. I have a couple of questions first.
Hey,
Kristen.
Jared, Kristen does have to cut out a little bit early, so there's questions specific for her. We probably want to get to those. And then we do want to make sure that Ashley has a chance to speak about how the facility is going to operate, because I would assume a lot of questions might be tied to what she may already be saying.
Okay.
So it might make sense just to have her give a little overview of what they're thinking, and then we can go into the Q&A.
Let's do that.
Okay. And then separate to that, we need to make a note that Mark Adams has joined us.
Oh, Mark Adams, are you here? Okay, so Ashley is here from Arches. I'm just going to turn it over to you. Go ahead and tell us about what you guys are planning.
Okay, did anyone have any questions for Kristen? I thought I heard Sarah say they wanted to do that really quickly for her first.
I can go on for another 15-20 minutes, so let's go ahead and have you hit on some things, Ashley.
Yeah, fantastic. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ashley Hamilton. I'm the program director of the Arches project through Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency. Just a little background, Arches is a homeless service delivery provider for Marion and Polk County. Our primary location is off of Commercial Street, right next to Marion Square Park, though we do have satellite locations scattered throughout the city of Salem, as well as into rural Marion and Polk County. We provide a variety of basic need and supportive services, focusing on outreach, showers, our day room, as well as transitioning individuals into permanent housing. Last year alone, we placed 406 families and households into permanent housing, and they were able to transition into self-sufficiency. And we also help operate the warming network for the city of Salem and provide funding opportunities for warming networks in rural Marion and Polk County. So this is definitely within our wheelhouse. I do have a PowerPoint if needed, so I do want to preface it. I'll give you guys a brief overview, but I do have a visual aid if needed. Right now, everything is at a proposal stage, and I'm so glad we're here today to discuss your questions and concerns and get a feel for how to integrate this service into the community as we're moving from proposal to draft to finalization. And what we're going to be doing is more of a continuum-based model. And this is really being driven out of a statewide response. I do find security in the fact that a lot of communities throughout the state are grappling with our same questions that we are today. Not enough shelter space. We're providing warming in the middle of a pandemic. How do we do this service safely for both guests and volunteers. And so that these conversations are happening all over. And what we're thinking is providing a three-phase shelter opportunity on site. The first being a indoor traditional warming shelter. So that would be that current structure located on the property. It can hold roughly 40 to 50, and I say that with because we're still working with those recommended COVID distancings. So about 40 to 50, and we're going to be holding that for specifically medically fragile populations. So those are individuals who might have autoimmune diseases, lower respiratory concerns, pregnancy, individuals who would be very negatively impacted if they did acquire COVID. And so we'd be really holding that indoor space for them. Then the next piece of that puzzle would be a potential managed camp. So we're thinking about placing that in the parking lot, which would be on the north side towards the railroad track for 30 spaces that would have privacy fencing around it. The tents would be uniform in nature, appropriately spaced, and it would allow for a singular camper, maybe partners, a singular household, in the tent and no more. And this would be for vulnerable populations. So women, families, elderly individuals, and then persons experiencing domestic violence. And from that, they would be able to stay every night from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. and then would be asked to leave the property at that time, when we would do new check-ins every day, very similar to our warming structure. And then the next piece of this continuum would be a safe parking component. So we have individuals who are unsheltered who do primarily reside in their vehicle. So we'd be providing the same opportunity as the managed camp, but in 10 specific parking locations where they could park every night safely via a check-in process. We do have guest expectations. So there's no alcohol or drug use allowed on site. We do have expectations regarding cleanliness, noise regulations, the proper use of restroom and trash facilities. We also would be utilizing staff primarily for this facility. That is one of the recommendations coming out of the state, is because the volunteer network is traditionally more vulnerable, that utilizing funds to hire staff and really focusing on training and regulation could really help the facility operate its three main components. Something that the facility would not be occurring on the facility, but it is an extra part of the continuum, is the Community Action Agency also has some additional hotel funding. So for households that are just incredibly vulnerable, like just too sick to be in a congregate shelter facility and or may have a COVID related ailment, then we can put them into a hotel while we're linking them to our medical community partners, as well as with the county for additional isolation and testing. So it's a whole continuum of service with some wraparound capabilities. So I will pause there.
Okay, thank you. So
Mark here. I have a question when you're ready.
Okay, I'll put you down. I got a question first. So when you say that you guys will have the outdoor camping tent areas in the parking lot, people are going to vacate that every day and then come back in and sign up again for those tents? Or are they going to be, or is that somewhere they're allowed to stay all day, not to the 6 o'clock at night or 7 in the morning thing?
Great question. The tents, the managed camp, the whole property is operational from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. Guests are not permitted to reside on property after those hours. And so it would be a new check-in process every day.
Okay, Mark, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I operate a business less than 2 blocks from your facility down there. The downtown businesses have been hit hard by the impact of your clients. Not trying to put a blame on anyone, but I'm wondering what you have in the way of programs that get people in more permanent facilities. You're doing a great job of dealing with temporary stuff, but temporary becomes a lifestyle, and that lifestyle affects businesses downtown. I've got vacancies all around me down here, and the biggest reason people are leaving downtown is the impact of the homeless community. So I want to know what you've got planned to get the people that need to be in permanent facilities, what you got going. I mean, dealing with them on a daily basis is great. We all deal with them on a daily basis. We chase them out of our businesses. We clean up after them. We do lots of stuff, and it's getting old, to be honest with you. And I appreciate the compassion that you guys have. You know, you're doing the same kind of services Union Gospel Mission is. The problem is you're all located in the same location. So I'd love to see you disperse some of that population to other parts of the community. And I would love to see referrals to people that need full structured environments, you know, whether that's some kind of an institution or not. I want to know what you have in place to place people in those permanent facilities. I'll be happy to support that. So there you go. There's your challenge.
Hey, Mark, I'm going to jump in real quick before Ashley answers a lot of great questions that you had. So I think just a matter of clarification, because you did jump into the meeting about halfway in. So what we're actually talking about is the former Zamora site, the site that we've been looking to acquire on Portland Road.
Right.
And what Kristen had actually shared is that right now there's a proposal in place for it to become a temporary overnight shelter space. And so that's actually what Ashley's talking about. So it would be for a limited 18-month duration. So
I thought you had that. I thought you had that already going with the local business groups. So the Hispanic support groups that were in there currently.
So that was part of the updates that we actually had before you got here. So there's
sorry, couldn't log on. Everything was messed up. So
there's been some changes to what's going on at the property, tied to how long it's taking for DEQ. Merritt is actually going to be moving out. And because of some of the needs in the community, the council and Kristen have been having conversations about using that particular site for just 18 months to help house, because of the issues we had last winter, to help house some of those that are most desperately in need, such as those that are medically, have medical challenges, or seniors. So that's what Ashley's sort of talking about. I mean, the downtown questions are great, and I think a lot of them are applicable to what's happening in North Gateway. But I just wanted to make sure you were on the same page as the rest of the board. That's all.
I am now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
A little bit to that before we go back to Ashley, because there are a lot of really good things that we are doing to get people into permanent housing, and there's a large number of people that we have moved through the process through our HRAP, our Housing Rental Assistance Program, and into permanent housing. And we've got new housing units out Redwood Crossings on Fisher Road that was an NGRAB project that are coming online. And we'll start renting those units this month. And we've got other developments also in the works to provide additional housing. One of the big concerns that I didn't mention earlier is we have a lot of people in our community that have been on eviction moratoriums that are going to be expiring in the future, and people that haven't been paying their rent during that time period because of COVID impacts. So we're also trying to get ahead and bringing more shelter capacity online in advance of that, because we, in all communities across this nation, we really don't have a handle on how many people might be losing their homes once the eviction moratoriums are lifted. And there's a lot of funding out there right now to assist with rental assistance, to help people stay in their units. But I think one of the things that we're seeing is that people aren't coming forward for those funds yet. Some are, but there are a lot of people that are going to face eviction in the future that aren't coming forward to get that assistance now for a variety of reasons. And, you know, we're continuing, Ashley's organization, our organizations, we're all continuing to do that outreach to make people aware of it. But I think as long as the moratoriums are in place, we're going to be seeing people falling further and further behind. And at some point, I think we will be seeing an explosion of evictions. And a lot of those people are going to, frankly, just end up out on the streets as well and add to the homeless issues within our community. And so this is just one other reason that we're trying to bring more capacity on in advance of what we're anticipating will be some pretty serious future impacts to the housing community. Anyway, I'll turn it back to Ashley at this point, and then I'm going to jump off in a few more minutes, Sarah.
Well said, Kristen. I cannot emphasize that point enough. We are absolutely seeing new households already emerging in our homeless communities. And it's a lot of households that recognize that they're thousands and thousands of dollars behind in rent. And so rather than going through the FED process, which can be really scary, and being held accountable to a payment plan that they're not able to achieve, they electively vacate the unit. And so they're falling into homelessness out of fear and trauma. And so I'm seeing this across the community already and are anticipating that situation to get much worse. I am working collectively with the Department of Justice, and I'm part of a landlord tenant committee, and we're looking at statewide kind of like temporary statutes that can help infuse rental assistance programs in the FED court process. So hopefully that'll help. But we already are seeing and do anticipate a growing homeless population as a result of COVID. Another consideration in result of COVID with our traditional warming shelters, in years prior, as Kristen stated earlier, warming shelters would operate on a temperature-based criteria. So at 32 degrees or below, our emergency shelter sites would activate. Last year, we had 4 shelter sites in our community, from Southtown to East Salem and in downtown, to where they were accessible to the highest density populations. This year, we are in talks with the same churches for opening. We already know we have 2 online, potentially a 3rd, and we would like to keep the emergency warming model available, because we all know that there's just not enough shelter beds, especially with this. So we're going to maintain the emergency network. And so that'll help disperse the population a little bit into these communities. And then we'll have the duration site available off of Portland Road. We're also actively working with DJ at Church at the Park, considering another duration project in another area. So we are trying very hard to find the right appropriate, the correct shelter opportunity for the population as they present. With the warming shelters in particular, we did in the past, and we're working on negotiating new contracts for this year, have transportation opportunities for the population. So getting them to and from warming shelters and to and from services. And so they're not necessarily stagnant in communities either. As far as Arches, we do have a very robust program opportunities for housing. As I stated earlier, last year we housed successfully 406 households into permanent housing. That is not even including our partnership with the Salem Housing Authority for the HRAP program, and then opportunities moving into this year, as Kristen mentioned, for the Redwood Crossing facility and new developments coming online. And so opportunities are growing. They're just kind of shifting a little bit because of COVID. Did that help answer your question?
So I want to put something, Mark, my understanding also is with the downtown thing is when they open the Zamora site, it kind of gives them a chance to spread people out. So you don't have so many people in one area affecting those businesses, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. The idea and my main concern is there are people that still can't function. If you get them a house, they get them an apartment, they just can't function. They need to be in a structured living environment. And my question is, what program do you have that evaluates people, that refers them to programs the state may have, that does effectively get them off the street permanently? And it sounds terrible, but that's the best thing for these people in a lot of cases is a structured learning and living environment. So.
Great question. So right now, Arches operates what we call coordinated entry. So that is basically a housing assessment which determines the vulnerability level of an individual, and it applies a numeric value to that vulnerability. So the higher the number, the more vulnerable they are. And essentially what that tool tells us is if you score up in a particular range, the likelihood of you ever being able to become self-sufficient or live independently in a traditional apartment or home, like the fellow callers on this meeting, is it becomes substantially lower the higher up you go on that scale. So there are absolutely housing opportunities locally in our community for this group. The problem is there's more people in this group than there is current opportunities. So what we can do is we can identify and assess this group. We know who they are. We know where they're falling on the scale. We have contact with them. Now our job as a community is to grow these opportunities and find placements. Thankfully, we do have the HRAP program that is for that scale. Placements at that new Redwood Crossing facility is also for that group. And then as our COC, that's the local continuum of care that started this year, that is one of their primary objectives, is growing housing opportunities for the most vulnerable among us. So we know the situation, we've identified the service gaps, we do have opportunities, but we absolutely need to expand upon them to arrive at a more broad solution base versus just focusing in more on the lower vulnerability scale of the population. So I absolutely agree. We need to grow these.
Go ahead, Nate.
Ashley, excuse me, John. I do have one quick question, and that is, can you address the conversation of housing or structured living assistance for the mentally ill component of the homeless?
I believe you're asking, actually, can you reiterate what you're asking? I apologize.
Okay, so I understand the evaluation process as far as rating the individuals, as far as the potential ability to find a residence that is viable within current configurations and a normal format. The substantial portion, or there is a substantial portion of the homeless population that is battling mental illness and a variety of things. What is ARCH's process to assist those individuals in finding some sort of solution to get them off the street?
All right, thank you so much. You are absolutely right. 40% of the unsheltered population has an active diagnosis for mental illness, and that is a self-reported figure. And my professional opinion is actually much higher, especially if we're talking about mismanaged or undiagnosed conditions. So what ARCHES is doing is, first we had to identify the problem in our community. So thankfully now we have that figure and we're able to find, really identify those service gaps. We use that to really dictate partnerships with Northwest Human Services, our local CCO, so Coordinated Care Organization. Pacific Source is also on board with helping us recognize these conditions. And we recently entered a partnership with Kaiser Permanente that is also interested in trying to create stronger pathways between housing and health opportunities. They've had some pretty successful initiatives down in California, so I'm hoping we can bring those online here. And really what that looks like is what we're doing at Redwood, but on a much larger scale. So Redwood is a 36-unit facility that has, it's more like single room occupancy, and it has individuals move into a space, and it has their furnishings are there for them, like their bed, their refrigerator, restroom supplies. And not only is that where they live, that's their home, but ARCHES is supplying on-site staff support with peer support specialists, case managers, and licensed mental health, licensed social workers. And so we're able to supply some on-site coordinated care while bringing in community partners such as Northwest Human Services, who has more of that mental health component. So we're supplying these services on-site directly to the residents and really optimizing that client contact and outcomes. This facility is actually based off of a program in Vancouver known as Lincoln Place, and it's been highly successful for several years. And so This is the first of our kind for us within Marion and Polk County. And when this is successful, we're going to have the platform to be able to justify further funding, some additional, hopefully some vouchers from the future, and state support to build more and more units. We've got a couple of plans drafted depending on a state and voucher support. So we're ready as soon as they're ready.
What do you anticipate is the current need or demand or count for the number of mentally ill in the immediate area?
Well, just doing a quick, so we know that 40%, as I stated, have a diagnosed mental illness. We have 1,800 unsheltered individuals in the community. So the demand would be a little over 700, and that's just based on the numbers we have.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Unmuted. There we go. Anyone else have any questions for Ashley? Kristen had to jump off. Pedro, anyone? Okay, I have a quick question. So how are you guys, what I don't want to, my concern with the Zamora site with you guys is what I've seen downtown is, you know, they're there overnight, and then during the day, they don't really disperse. So you end up with just that whole area of that street is just going to be people hanging out. And then what that leads to is, you know, you guys have your tents over there, but all of a sudden the whole line of the street is going to be tents and people are going to be right next to it because that's where they're all hanging out at. What are you guys going to do to enforce keeping them off the street as far as, you know, right there in public view? Because, you know, it's a pretty nice part of town. We've been cleaning it up nicely. I don't want to see tents everywhere all of a sudden. Does that make sense?
Oh, it absolutely does. Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on that. So the first being the Zamora site is unique in the fact that it's not really close to very many traditional service access points. It's not nearby to Arches. It's not near UGM or Hope. And so it works great in the sense that it will disperse the population somewhat, but ultimately they're going to have to head back to these organizations for showers, for meals, to check in with their housing case manager. And so they're going to be moving. When I have conversations with the population, I know this sounds surprising, and it's not 100% of the time, but they have a more regimented schedule than even I do. So they have to be at this place for a meal, then they have to be at this place to go get their shower, then they have to be at this place at this time for their appointment, or oh no, they don't have an ID, now they got to go run over to the DMV. They are moving, and they are their schedule is just super regimented. And so it's not everyone and it's not all the time, but they will disperse. And especially if they're going to be accessing our traditional services at other locations. So I feel really good about the movement there, especially if we can get our traditional partnerships back online for this season regarding transportation, because that's going to be a big one to help.
Okay,
I have a question as well.
Sorry, hold on one second. Okay, that was going to be my next question, is the transportation. So you guys are trying to set up transportation where
Yes.
if they need to get back over here to get a meal, you guys are going to help them get moving on that.
Yeah, we absolutely want to help support that. Last year we had buses and taxi services available, and I'd like to continue that into this year. Another piece I just want to mention is just about operational philosophy. This is, again, more like in draft phase. But if we focus more on service provision, especially those managed camp outside and the safe parking spaces, if individuals know that that spot is reserved for them for a week or a 2-week space, so they have to leave during the day, but they know, okay, I got to go back and this is my space. That's going to cut down on folks in the area as well, because they're not waiting every night like in line, like, oh, it's a first come first serve, I have to be there really, really early to get my spot. If they already know that their spot is waiting for them and it's held for 2 weeks, I think that's going to help quite a bit. We'll have to test that out, but I know that worked last year in our duration site at Church of the Park, so I imagine it'll be successful as well.
Okay, who else had a question? I heard somebody chime in.
I have a question. So Ashley, with the homeless population that you guys serve, what's the whole population that we know as a community of homeless, and then what percentage of that population do you actually serve?
What we know for the city of Salem, we have about 1,800 unsheltered persons in our community. Last year, for the whole fiscal year of 2019, so that's July 1, 2019 to June 30th, 2020, we performed actually 2,400 housing assessments. That can be a combination of folks who are unsheltered, potentially in emergency shelter situations, or just kind of teetering on the edge. So maybe couch surfing. So it's a little more of a broad range figure, but we absolutely know the need is fairly substantial. And then last year alone, talking about Arch's service delivery, it depends on which sphere we're talking about. If you're looking at supportive services like meals and coming to the day center, case navigation, we're looking at 18,000 visits to our day center during that same year-long timeframe, which was about 1,100 unique individuals. And then for housing, as I stated, we housed 406 households last year through Arches alone.
Thanks for that information. I mean, that's a lot of numbers, and I want to learn more about how that all adds up and how you guys kind of calculate that data, because you said 1,800 people that we know are on the streets. You had 2,400 checking in with you, and then 18,000 check-ins throughout the whole year. Do you guys have any of that data on your website, or like any numbers? So I can look at everything that you guys calculate.
Yeah, great question. We're actually in the process of developing our annual homeless report. So that will drop on our website, I'm hoping by the beginning to middle of September. And so I can actually make sure that that gets published out. And it'll probably be sent out through multiple pathways, but it will be readily available. The way we collect that information, just so you know, we are active users of the Homeless Management Information System. So it's quite techy. So it's much more advanced than a standard Excel sheet. The way we do it is every individual that we make contact with actually has a profile on that system, and we can track their individual service transactions. So I can look at Joe Smith and know that he was at Arches on this day, and this day. He got a shower, he got a meal, and he got into housing over on this date. And then maybe he utilized our warming shelter on this date last year. So we can get a pretty good map of a unique individual and of our individual programs.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Does anyone else have any questions for Ashley?
Yeah, Mark here real quick. Ashley, I've seen other models in cities where they will bring in, much like your food carts that were at the Zamora site temporarily, they will bring in like a bus that's full of a washing machine so people can do laundry, or a shower complex. Is there any interest, or how would you go about adding those type of services to the Zamora site that are temporary services? So kind of a mobile shower or mobile laundry facility, that kind of a thing. I want to be creative and get the community behind the idea, and that may alleviate some of the transportation issues if you can have some of those type of services available.
Absolutely. We do have a mobile shower unit here at Arches. It's a nice little trailer with 3 shower stalls, one of which is ADA accessible. Right now it's down because of COVID. There are some pretty significant concerns about how to make that program as safe as possible for the user and the volunteer and staff that operate the trailer. And we're looking at some statewide and national best practices of how to do that. So I hope to have that online relatively soon. We do not have a laundry trailer in this community, but a lot of conversations are actually starting to steer that direction. I'm hearing about it more and more. So I would not be surprised at some point, whether it's Arches or another community partner, which may go that direction, but we just don't have that currently. But mobile shower, if we can get it online in a COVID environment, would absolutely be made available to that facility.
So I guess my question to that would be, so when that would the showers only be available from 7 to 6 in the morning, or 7 in the morning?
That's a good question. It might have to be like those early morning hours, likely. So maybe like a 6 to 7 or like a 6 to 8 in the morning. So kind of broadening that time frame out a bit. I don't imagine it would be really effectively used if it was a nighttime, especially if we're trying to encourage our guests to sleep. So I'm not sure if that would really help with the noise regulations that we're trying to put in place. So it might be counterintuitive. So that's a really great point.
Yeah, I don't want to see it, you know, all of a sudden it's, you know, 6 to 8, and then now all of a sudden we're at 9, and then all of a sudden it's an all day thing. And then, you know, and then everyone is just hanging out here now.
Right. Well, it would have to be like a certain number of service slots available. So we certainly wouldn't be able to shower every resident every day, because that would be an all day thing, especially with 3 shower stalls and an enhanced COVID cleaning procedure. So it'd be a certain number of slots and a certain time frame that we'd keep it under. That for sure.
Any other questions from the board? I'm not hearing any, sir.
I got one more
go ahead.
question. Do you know the population that you guys serve, where they're from exactly? Are they all from Salem, Portland, the state of Oregon? Do you guys keep that data as you guys track your clients, Ashley? Can't hear you. You're on mute. All right, she's having.
She said one.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I had to move my computer. It was gonna die on me. So, okay, so yes, we track the origin of our population. So what their birthplace, as well as how long they've been in Marion and Polk County, because we actually get this question quite a lot. So as you would suspect, there is a fair amount of the population that was not born in Oregon, but that's not too uncommon. I don't know about you, but almost all my friends were born in California. I'm like one of the few like Oregon-based residents. I'm Oregon born. So that's not really that surprising. But what we are seeing is the average length of time for someone to live in our community before they fell into homelessness was 23 years. So these are actually our people, people that have lived and invested in our communities and accessed services and made friends and have relationships. And so it's, 23 years is the average amount of time. So they're here for a bit.
All right, thank you.
Sarah, do you have anything? I know we're a little bit over time, guys. So Sarah, did you have anything you wanted to add?
The only thing I would ask, and I think I know the answer, but since we have Ashley, so Ashley, I know we're still obviously in the proposal phase and things are still being worked out. And just so the board knows, part of the reason why we wanted to bring this to your attention today, one is we had been trying to get an update on your calendar for this site from Clint, as you recall, the last couple of months. COVID happened, a lot of things happened. And so the timing just worked out really well as this conversation really has only been going on for maybe a month and a half to even see if it's an option. We wanted to make sure that the information was in front of you all before it kind of started percolating out in the public. Things like this start to move fast when people hear about, different facilities, and we didn't want anyone to get caught off guard in terms of, one, what was happening, and two, that it is limited duration. I think that's the biggest thing to remember. And two, that it's going to be managed differently than some of the other facilities that I think people have seen. So what I would ask for Ashley is, when is your hopeful kind of go live date, I guess?
I think it kind of goes back to what Kristen said earlier. The funding for this operation is still very much in the air. We have a couple of pockets of funds that are being distributed from the state, and we were awarded an allocation from the city to assist in warming efforts. These will largely go to support the emergency warming network. So it's those church activations based on the 32-degree temperature. What we're looking for duration models is funding streams that are a little more specific and are still pending up on the state level. So that's largely going to drive how this operation unfolds, whether it's all three of those components, the warming, the managed camp, and the safe parking, or it's a variation of the three. And it's also going to determine the time frame as well. The duration model could be hyper-focused on those coldest months, so December through February. It could also run the full duration of a traditional warming cycle, which is November 1st to March 31st. It's going to be largely dependent on the funding because we want the managed site at the Zamora location to be largely staff funded. We want to be able to put employees on the ground that are trained in trauma-informed care, client-centered principles, de-escalation techniques, and that are familiar with the Arches and Salem Warming Network philosophy. So it's very important to us to have formal staff on site.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? No one?
No.
Okay, well,
Ashley.
hey, thank you very much, Ashley, and I appreciate everyone staying over and listening to the answers from Ashley and the questions. I think we can go ahead and bring this. Oh, Ashley, I got one more question. When could we expect an update of what we're doing?
I think what might be helpful, and if you guys don't disagree, I do have a warming coordinator. Her name is Renette Gonzalez. She is absolutely on board with visiting area neighborhood associations and having continued conversations with communities. So in preparation for the warming season, I can invite her to these meetings on a regular basis to give just little updates over time if you guys would like.
And Jared, what I can do is I can coordinate with Kristen and with Ashley, and when we're at a point where there's sort of that solid plan and we know exactly what's going to happen in the funding, at that point, then we can make sure that we bring everybody back to the table so that the board's getting an appropriate update.
Okay, excellent. And then I guess my only other question, Sarah, is does that mean we stop all idea flowing on the food hub in the meantime? Or as a board, are we still going to be looking into different ideas and, you know?
It's not as though we're stopping. I mean, we had done a lot of due diligence early on. I know that we provided a presentation to the board. We're also still working to have conversations with potential developers that's the type of product that they actually put out there. So they manage it. As we all know, that's the biggest issue. We need the coaching and the mentoring for when we get into that food hub concept. So we're still working on that. It hasn't stopped. But until we can clear a lot of these DEQ issues, we just can't do anything. So, I mean, we can't even sign an agreement with somebody because we don't own the site. So our hands are tied a little bit, but it doesn't mean that we're stopping. So we've got a few developers that we've kind of looked into to try and do some initial meetings with. So it's not as though the progress has stopped. It's just we're sort of just moving at a little bit of a different pace.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting and let everyone move on with their day. But it's great to see you all.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks, Jared.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jared.
Thank you.
See you next time. Thanks.
Bye.